a really amazing time to be alive. Computing power, energy, and medical technology are becoming exponentially cheaper and far more abundant. In the same way that our vast libraries now fit on tiny flash drives, things like solar energy and DNA sequencing and mobile internet are becoming increasingly accessible. That means a cleaner, healthier, and more connected world where so many of the grand global challenges can be solved through technology. But there's one challenge that seems a little more difficult, and if we want to keep our humanity, we can't ignore it. I want you to consider this chart. It shows you that about 60 million people live in what we would call the refugee crisis. About 172 million are affected by war and civil strife. About 218 million people are affected each year by natural disasters. About 780 million people lack clean drinking water, and about 830 million people live on less than $2 a day. But there's one problem that's even bigger than all of these problems combined, and that's the problem of authoritarianism. And while there's been a massive global industry to address problems like the lack of clean water and extreme poverty, there's been no coordinated effort to waged against authoritarianism. Today, 52% of the world's population lives under an authoritarian regime. That's about 4 billion people. This is one of the largest, if not the largest, problem affecting humanity today. Here's a freedom of information map. In Africa, we see dictators rule everywhere from Zimbabwe to Eritrea to Angola to Ethiopia to Equatorial Guinea. If this summit is designed to educate, empower, and inspire African leaders to leverage exponential technologies to improve their societies, then we must focus on governance. Now, the founders of Singularity University believe several things. One, that virtually every problem on Earth can be solved, and that the biggest problems on Earth make for the biggest opportunities, and that we should dare to make the world a better place. And yes, they chose governance as one of SU's global grand challenges. Here it is: equitable participation, individual rights. These things are the values that authoritarianism tries to erase. And this problem is at the root of almost all major problems in the world today. Consider poverty, extremism, corruption, war. Think about it. Free nations have never gone to war with one another. In human history, it is the only ironclad law of political theory. Meanwhile, dictators are always at war, often with a foreign power and always with their own people. Consider this image. This is not an island, and above it is not an ocean. Does anyone know what this is? That's right, this is a nighttime image of the Korean peninsula from a satellite. What we see here is a miraculously thriving, bright South Korean society filled with world-class inventions and achievements. In the north, it's an abyss. It's just total darkness. Now there's one point of light, and that's the capital, Pyongyang. Just like in the Hunger Games, there's a real-life Snow who lives there in electricity with the modern trappings of luxury while his people suffer and starve in the darkness in District 12. Think about the opportunity cost of dictatorship, the talent and innovation lost from 25 million North Koreans whose potential is completely asphyxiated. And then think about the billions of people around the world, everywhere from Eritrea to Zimbabwe, who can't pursue their dreams or collaborate with one another because they simply disagree with their government. So to future-proof Africa, I want to argue that we need to address the authoritarianism crisis. Now, we learn a lot here at SU about exponential technologies, but technology is agnostic. It can be good or it can be evil. Imagine for a moment that you swipe into a subway station and you purchase coffee from the nearest stand and you book a restaurant for lunch, all with the same app. You add a new friend to your social network and pay them for the dinner that you had together last night. You take a look at how crowded the public park is going to be tomorrow, but you decide to go anyway. All of this is done with one app, all at the same time. Now, it might sound nice and convenient, but what if the government was using that app to monitor all of your daily life? This is the reality in China today, where Tencent is one of the world's largest technology companies. And they have an app called WeChat with almost 930 million users. Now, many of them spend more than 4 hours a day on this app. WeChat users range from millennials to baby boomers. A Chinese friend of mine told me that her grandfather, who's 96 years old, uses WeChat, and all of this information is tightly surveilled. Most Chinese aren't aware that their data is being mined. Some might know and say to themselves, well, I have nothing to hide, I'm not doing anything wrong. Others say, well, in the West, it's bad to collect behavior data. But here, our government uses it to make public infrastructure better. So China's authorities proceed, gathering unprecedented amounts of information on their citizens. You might say, hey, here in South Africa, Google and Facebook are collecting my data anyway. And you're right, but the difference is in China, the system is not built to protect your privacy. It's built to allow the government to control your life. A few years ago, citizens in the Chengdu province decided to protest a chemical power plant that was coming into their locality. They planned the protest on social media, but the local government was able to figure it out by monitoring that media. They declared that day, the protest day, mandatory to go to school and work. So today, the regime routinely tracks movements of all of its citizens and is very easily able to stop and predict protests before they happen. On WeChat, any posts with any sort of political or counter-revolutionary content are actively censored. This even applies to WeChat users abroad. So I'm sure there's plenty of people in the room here who are using WeChat. If you go into your app right now and try to search for Liu Xiaobo, the name of the Chinese Nobel Peace Prize laureate who recently died in Chinese government detention, your message is not going to go through, even though you're here in Johannesburg. Since 2015, hundreds of millions of customers of basically the company that owns WeChat, Tencent's other rival, Alibaba, have had something called a Sesame Score. So a Sesame Score is a credit score that it's not just based on your credit history, it's also based on your social networks and political behavior. So with a high score, you can get special privileges. Your child can go to a top school. You can get a preferential rate on a loan. Or you can get a quick visa to go to a foreign country. However, if your post is deemed problematic, your credit score will go down. And if any of your friends post something problematic, your score can go down too, just because you're connected to them. So today, Tencent is launching its own social credit system to rival Alibaba's Sesame Score. So everyone in China will have their economic personal power tied to their political obedience. Recently, Beijing ordered Apple to remove VPNs from the Chinese app stores. These are the digital tools that citizens use to circumvent the Great Firewall. But Tim Cook did it. He agreed. And when asked why he did it, he just said he was following Chinese law. Today, companies are even helping the regime predict the future behavior of their citizens with AI designed to identify suspects before they commit crimes. The company CloudWalk uses facial recognition and movement analysis to assess crime potential. When that potential becomes too high, they alert the police. It's pre-crime. In China, an individual can't be charged for a crime they haven't committed, but they can be charged for basically planning to commit a crime. And you can be charged as an accomplice if you're friends with someone who's going to commit a crime. So this is basically a future that's not far off from the one that was painted in the science fiction film Minority Report. And the evolution of the surveillance state will continue. Just a few days ago, news broke that Tencent is going to boost its AI efforts with its massive new quarterly profits. So today, not only are authoritarians ruling more than half the world, but they're using exponential technology to expand their wealth and power. This is the present. This is the future, unless we do something. As individuals, we need to create our own technology solutions to help protect our civil liberties. Here's one example that I want to share of a project that we've worked on that does this at the Human Rights Foundation.
뜨거운 경모의 정을 담아 위대한 김일성 동지와 김정일 동지께 가장 숭고한 경의와 새해 인사를 삼가드립니다.
There's a new and unconventional effort aimed at undermining the dictatorship in North Korea.
Human rights activists are now collecting old USB sticks, which will be smuggled into North Korea.
Getting content from the modern world into the hands of North Koreans kept in the dark by a repressive regime.
In a country where total censorship is used to brainwash its people, outside information is an effective tool to make North Koreans question the government's propaganda and actions.
When I saw movie Titanic, but in this movie, man can die for love. And I think that really gave me some taste of freedom.
Flash Drives for Freedom is an effort to collect flash drives. The drives are erased, filled with films, books, and Wikipedia, and smuggled into North Korea using drones and other means, then viewed on USB media players owned by most North Koreans. We encouraged donations with an interactive installation, where audio from Kim Jong-un's speech was silenced whenever a USB drive was inserted. While on tour, an odd thing happened. Our installation was stolen, while more expensive items were left untouched. But we built it again, and it continues to travel the world. Drives were also donated by USB Memory Direct every time our hashtag was used.
Flash Drives for Freedom. It's a project which hopes to expose average North Koreans to
Millions of hours from the outside world are already in North Korea, turning your flash drive into someone else's freedom.
So, Flash Drives for Freedom is one example of how activists and creatives and technologists can team up to make a difference. And as much as I've talked about the human rights perils of technology, there are tremendous amounts of promise if leveraged correctly. So consider that Kim Jong-un stays in power by brainwashing his citizens and keeping them off the internet. But 10 years from now, with the help of initiatives like Google's Project Loon or Facebook's Internet.org, there will be free or very cheap satellite internet over regions like North Korea. There will also probably be very cheap and very small 3D printed receivers that'll be impossible to keep out. And at that point, goodbye, Kim Jong-un. There are similar inevitabilities here in Africa. Smartphone penetration is skyrocketing across the continent, boosting entrepreneurship, transparency, and education. Expanding internet access can help us advance open societies. We have to engage the private sector and convince them that our civil liberties and human rights are worth protecting. One way that the SU founders thought they could spark this kind of dialogue and this bridge building was through building communities. And for the past decade or so, our team at the Human Rights Foundation has built a unique cross-industry gathering designed to basically put together diverse leaders from different fields to address the governance challenge. It's called the Oslo Freedom Forum. At the Oslo Freedom Forum, we're looking for moonshots for human rights. And of course, activists can't achieve a moonshot alone. They need help. They need to team up with creatives, entrepreneurs, philanthropists, journalists. In Oslo, activists speak on stage to an influential crowd where they can raise money for their work, shine a media spotlight on what they're doing, learn how to scale their organizations, and even meet up with technologists that can teach them how to be safer with encryption. So I wanted to share a very brief clip about our last event.
And that's a wrap for the Oslo Freedom Forum 2017. After opening remarks from Prime Minister of Norway, Erna Solberg, we were immersed in a series of talks, panels, and workshops from speakers from all around the world, starting from lessons for women activists to how technology can help save us from oppressive regimes. The topic of this year, the theme, defending democracy, became alive in a multitude of ways.
We want a world where people can speak freely.
I could be that girl that can rise up, defend the rights of my fellow young girls in my community.
We can only beat them by not giving in.
Even in the darkest of moments, we must never lose the ability to dream of freedom.
But in order for us to have any solutions, we need to know there is hope out there.
please do not stay silent.
Yes, I ask you to. Please stand with us.
The answer is you.
It was a call to action to every Zimbabwean to stand up and speak up.
We have to keep pushing the frontiers of our democracy, and that's the only way we will become a better people.
The audience is just as interesting as the speakers, and both sides know that.
You, the people, have the power to make this life free and beautiful, to make this life a wonderful adventure. Then in the name of democracy, let us use that power. Let us all unite.
Stay tuned for these captivating talks, which will be released on OsloFreedomForum.com, and we invite you to join us next year on the Oslo Freedom Forum 2018 from May 28th to May 30th.
I urge you to think about your personal or corporate core capacities. What are you really good at? I know that you have special talents that can help human rights activists, but first you have to meet them. So that's why I'm inviting all of you to come to the Oslo Freedom Forum, where you can learn about their challenges. Then we can start creating effective solutions to the government's challenge. Over the past 2 days, we've thought really hard about how exponential technology can make our lives better. But we can't forget that dictators have stolen the rights and freedoms of more than 1 billion people using advanced technology like WeChat. China may be an extreme case, but even here in South Africa, smart sensors are on the rise. Think about Nests. Think about medical implants. The Internet of Things is exploding, and we need to petition companies and governments to make sure that they protect our data and our civil liberties. We need to be loud about this. We can't risk getting left out of the conversation. If exponential innovation is not citizen-driven, then the Chinese state surveillance model will come. It will be here in Johannesburg and beyond. But I think we can take a stand for human rights and civil liberties. I think you can create solutions, creative solutions to the government's challenge, and I think you will. So thank you very much.